For decades, Bob Dylan has been one of music's most mysterious figures. The man who changed the face of folk and rock, who wrote songs that became anthems for generations, has always kept his deepest truths hidden. Fans, critics, and even fellow musicians have speculated endlessly about what lies behind his cryptic words, his quiet demeanor, and his guarded life. But now, at 84 years old, Dylan has finally spoken, admitting something that people have whispered about for years. And the truth is more powerful than anyone expected. Bob Dylan was never just a musician, he was a symbol. In the 1960s, he rose to fame with a voice that seemed to speak for an entire generation. But unlike many stars who basked in the spotlight, Dylan was different. He was distant, reserved, and often evasive when people tried to get close. Interviews were a challenge. He would answer questions with riddles, jokes, or not at all. This created a strange paradox. The man who wrote some of the most emotionally honest songs of all time also seemed to hide behind a wall no one could break through. Through the years, Dylan reinvented himself countless times. Folk singer, rock poet, country storyteller, born-again Christian bluesman. Each change left fans wondering, who was the real Bob Dylan? Was he just playing roles? Or was there a truth he was protecting? People speculated endlessly. Some thought he was hiding personal pain. Others believed he was simply avoiding the dangers of fame. But Dylan never explained. When reporters pressed him, he would smile faintly and change the subject. When friends tried to dig deeper, he'd steer the conversation elsewhere. His silence became part of his legend. As Dylan leaned back in his chair, he began speaking slowly, almost as if he was feeling the weight of each word. He admitted that the reason he had been so guarded all his life wasn't because he wanted to be mysterious for the sake of image. It was because he had been carrying a burden he never knew how to share. He spoke about his early days in Minnesota, how music had become his escape from a small-town life that often felt suffocating. But behind the passion for songs and poetry, there was an anxiety that followed him everywhere. "I never felt like I belonged anywhere," he said. "Not in school, not in my neighborhood, not even when I was on top of the charts." Dylan described how, in the whirlwind of the 1960s, fame didn't feel like a blessing. It felt like a trap. People wanted answers from him, wanted him to be a voice for movements, revolutions, and causes. But deep down, he wasn't sure he even had the answers for himself. Every stage he stood on, every crowd that sang his lyrics back to him, felt like a reminder that he was living up to an image rather than showing his real self. This was the part people had long suspected, that Dylan's reluctance to engage with fame wasn't arrogance or disinterest, but discomfort. He confessed that he sometimes wrote songs as a way to speak without having to directly reveal his own heart. "The songs could carry the truth," he said, "but I didn't have to stand there and say, 'This is me.'" Even his closest collaborators often misunderstood him. They saw a genius who worked tirelessly on his craft. But few realized that his constant reinvention, switching genres, changing his look, disappearing for years, wasn't just creative experimentation. It was a way of keeping people from getting too close. And the interviewer asked Dylan the question that had hovered over him for years. Did he regret the way he handled fame? For a moment, the old Dylan surfaced. He smirked, looked away, and tapped his fingers on the arm of his chair. But then he nodded. "I do," he said quietly. "I regret not letting people in sooner. Not because I owe anyone anything, but because I realize now. I needed it. I needed connection more than I admitted to myself." This was the confession fans had long suspected. That Bob Dylan's detachment had come at a personal cost. The man who had written about love, loss, war, and hope had often done so in isolation. He revealed that some of his most famous songs weren't just about political unrest or fictional characters. They were about his own loneliness. "When you hear me sing about someone leaving, about feeling lost in the world, that was me," he said. "Not a character, not a metaphor, just me." The admission was raw, and it made sense in a way that almost felt inevitable. People had always guessed that Dylan's cryptic songwriting came from somewhere deeply personal, but now he was confirming it outright. He had been writing his truth all along, just hidden under layers of allegory and poetry. He also spoke about the relationships he had let slip away, friends, lovers, even fellow musicians, because he couldn't bring himself to drop the mask. "I was afraid of being ordinary," he confessed. "Afraid that if I stopped being Bob Dylan, I'd just be another guy with a guitar." This was perhaps the most human moment of all. For years, fans had seen Dylan as untouchable, a living legend who operated on a different wavelength. But here he was, admitting to the same fear that haunts so many, the fear of not being enough. As he spoke, there was no dramatic music, no sensational twist. Just a man in his twilight years finally telling the truth he had carried for a lifetime. And while it was something people had suspected, hearing him say it out loud gave it a weight that speculation never could.